It's Saturday, May 24th, 2025. You're moving at the speed of creativity with Wesley Fryer, narrowcasting westbound on Interstate 40 between Knoxville and Nashville, Tennessee. Well, good afternoon, and welcome to another podcast. I realized today, as I was outlining this podcast, that this year, 2025, marks the 20th anniversary of moving at the speed of creativity. And while I have certainly not been nearly as prolific in the production of these podcasts in the last few years as I was initially, I think I needed to look up what the episode number is. I'm going to guess it's in the 400s. I don't know. My friend Jason Neiffer and I, who have a almost every Wednesday night podcast now called the EdTech Situation Room, I think are somewhere around episode 350 or something like that. But I have never been a weekly podcast and regular. But I do have some reflections that I want to share. And I actually did or taught a multi-segment podcast unit this year for my middle school web design students. And so anyway, that just inspired me to sort of go back to some of my podcasting roots and reflect on Room 208 with Bob Sprankle. And we listened to, one of his kids' podcasts and their description of how to do all this. So I want to go ahead in the normal style and go ahead and edit this podcast. The one thing I am going to use is an AI tool. There's a couple different AI powered audio tools. I've been using alphonic.com for a number of years to what I would call normalize or level podcasts, but it can also enhance the podcast by removing background noise. And when I have tried to record podcasts in the car, there's just a lot of road noise, and it was kind of irritating. So hopefully, as you hear this, you are not hearing any of the noise of the interstate as it is going by. The other one that I might use, and I might try and compare them, I know Alphonic does a great job. There's another one that I use called Descript, Descript.com. And Descript is definitely AI powered. It's a much newer tool, and it has some AI features that it calls Overlord. It's in a section called the Overlord tools, which is kind of funny. But it can make studio sound, and it can also remove filler words. So the times that I say or but or or anything like that, in fact, if I do this later, it may even cut those out, so you might not hear those at all. So anyway, here is the outline for what I would like to talk about today. The main thing I want to talk about is ways that I have used Flint AI, Flint Artificial Intelligence, with students in the 2024-25 school year. We just had our last day with students yesterday on Friday, and as I'm sure you are aware, listening to this, artificial intelligence tools continue to just explode in their capability and their power. They are also extremely challenging for many classroom teachers and administrators and educators who are assessing in traditional ways, I guess, student skills and student knowledge. And so anyway, I used Flint AI activities, which Flint AI is a platform that our school licenses, and I used them in each of the 4 classes that I taught this semester. I actually ended up teaching 4 in addition to web design and what I call computer apps, or what is called computer apps. I like to call it media literacy. And then also a introduction to computer programming class, all for middle school. I did also teach AP computer science principles for high school students, and I taught about the last half to a third of the semester because a colleague had resigned. So anyway, that is the main thing that I want to talk about. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what was one of the most wonderful media infused projects that I've done. And it was for our Capstone activities that we do at the end of the year. And it has to do with refugees and InfoPics. And then I want to also share just a few website updates about places where I am creating and sharing content. As I said, I haven't shared a podcast here on this channel in quite a while, and I have pod faded a bit, but I haven't, disappeared on this channel, and I really do value this channel, and I've actually thought about some things in terms of repurposing and sharing podcasts that have been published on this channel for a long, long time. And so, anyway, that is what we're going to do. So now let's have a little audio bumper and we'll get into the next segment. All right, well, I would like to share a little story about a fantastic lesson that I ended up leading and facilitating this past week. And it was a culmination of a series of different lessons. Our school has some traditions at the end of the school year, and for the last 3 days, which are typically finals for high school students as well as 8th grade students, our 6th and 7th graders participate in something called Capstone, and that has changed in in its focus and what the activities involve over the years. But one of the aspects this year was working to help a local nonprofit. And students were given, I want to say, 5 or 6 different options. And these are nonprofits that our school has existing relationships with. We do not have a service learning office and service learning full-time staff member. We have community engagement, and I've learned a little bit about reasons why community engagement is favored by some over service learning. But anyway, the one, and when we were able to volunteer as teachers for which one of these we would be interested in. Excuse me, isn't that exciting radio to hear me yawn? Which one we'd like to work with. And so the one that I signed up with actually has the acronym RSS. It stands for Refugee Support Services, and it is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we live and where our school is. And there were actually it was odd that only boys signed up. There were 2 different groups, and I had a group of 10 boys that were interested in this nonprofit and their work. And so we ended up studying their website, watching videos that they had shared on their YouTube channel, on social media. But then we also were able to set up a Zoom call with them and learn quite a bit about their mission, the work that they do, and the ways that they need help. And about the organization. And so I guess I could say at the outset that World Refugee Day is coming up on, I think it's June 21st of 2025, next month, almost in exactly a month, actually. And so they're going to have a bunch of events and I think need volunteers and really want to help get the word out about that. The organization, Refugee Support Services, does not place refugees in homes or in communities. There are 2 different organizations, and they explain this on the Zoom: Catholic Relief Services, and then there's an organization, I think it's called, it's like Refugee Support of the Carolinas. It's specific to, I think, both North and South Carolina. And so those 2 agencies are the ones that actually place refugees within communities and find them housing. And then after they are housed, this group that we were learning about and supporting, Refugee Support Services, gets involved. And so they assist refugees and their families in really connecting to the community. They do offer, food assistance, but they have, knitting groups and groups to let them come together and do some crafts and build relationships. And they are, I guess, during COVID, and that's what a number of their videos on their website were about. They help with a variety of different, bureaucratic, I guess, paperwork requirements that, immigration and naturalization services require. They explained on our Zoom that some of these families could be in a refugee camp for years and years, maybe even up to 10 years before they are finally placed. And it's really, boy, so different to imagine what their experiences have been like and are like. And, of course, here in the United States right now, as I record this in, late May of 2025, it's a little over 100 days, since President Trump took office. There are all kinds of changes and things happening to immigration rules and to immigrants. There are deportations happening. There are all kinds of rules and changes and things happening with, international students. And so it is really kind of a wild and chaotic time for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons I was very interested in supporting, I guess I just turned on and realized my radio was on. I was really interested in getting involved in helping support this group was because my perception is that there's a great deal of fear and even more uncertainty in the lives of immigrants and refugees who are here in the United States. And so it is, I think, a very important thing to support our neighbors and learn about ways that organizations are supporting our neighbors, especially those who have suffered trauma and have moved to a new place. And I'm looking forward to continuing to learn more about this organization. Okay, so what we had talked about doing was creating basically some visual advertisements to let people know about Refugee Support Services of Charlotte. I have called these as a media literacy teacher InfoPics because it's basically an image file that combines text, and usually a short amount of text, with an image. And it is sort of like an advertisement. It's a marketing image, and it's an image meant to communicate and to inform, to amplify, to educate. And so my students and I obtained some of the pictures from the Instagram feed of Charlotte's Refugee Support Services. We also found some pictures using some different websites, found some copyright-friendly pictures on a website called Photos for Class. I also had some students using Canva, which Canva was the editing tool that we used, who used Canva's AI, artificial intelligence tools, to create some images. And it was really important to talk about a lot of aspects. There was one image that was a bit too graphic, in our opinion, to be fully included. And so some students used it and cropped that image. We talked about how important it was to try to represent accurately the needs and mission of Refugee Support Services, but how we also wanted to be sensitive to, I guess, stereotypes and to, wanting to just create images that would genuinely amplify the good work and the need for volunteers that they have, and, things that would be, I guess, faithful, truthful, and genuinely helpful to them and to their mission. So I will include a link in the podcast show notes to a web page, which actually I need to put together tonight. I have all of my students were working on their iPads, and they shared the images they created in Canva in a single folder. We collaborated to put sort of blank pictures or just photos without text, into a single folder, and then students got those, and it gave a great opportunity to talk about, how to make an effective InfoPic. Probably about half of these students I've had in class before, and I've taught about making InfoPics. So using, large text, small amounts of text, good contrast. In this case, we were using their logo. In some cases, we had to put a colored shape behind their transparent logo so that it stood out. We tried to use their web address which is refugeesupportservices.org. Anyway, this was really a wonderful, wonderful project. I enjoyed so much being able to, teach students how to use these technology skills and these techniques, but to do this for a really important purpose, not simply, for an academic cognitive, hey, let's learn about, this topic or this concept, but it's this idea of really, these images might really help the organization. And so in addition to, sharing it here, I'm also going to be emailing that to my students and their parents, and then encouraging them, if they are interested and willing, for their parents who are on social media, to use some of these images to let other people in our Charlotte community know about refugee support services, to let people know about the upcoming International Refugee Day on June 21st, and to encourage them to get involved. I am hoping that this summer they have a Wednesday food distribution event. I think it's every Wednesday, and that's one that they need volunteers for. The woman who had coordinated the Zoom call that we had is named Esther, and so I'm going to be following up with her. But yeah, it was excellent. It was a wonderful culminating activity that we could do at the end of the school year, and it brought together not only technology skills, but also, I think, some of the global education values and goals that we have as a school, which is to be more globally aware, to develop, empathy and understanding, and then also to find ways to take action as citizens who have responsibilities to, try and do good and to help others. And in amplifying the work of Charlotte's Refugee Support Services, and, encouraging not only my students, but their families to possibly get involved in helping in some way, whether that's, donating food or other items or volunteering their time. It was just really positive. So there you go. There's your update about a recent lesson that was quite successful and that I really enjoyed teaching. All right. Well, in the next segment, I want to talk a little bit about some website updates, and I guess I probably better talk not be so long-winded about this, because the main thing I want to get to is the AI section. But I have been creating and sharing content on a variety of different websites that I may not have mentioned before on the Speed of Creativity channel. And, it's interesting. As I mentioned, this podcast is 20 years old in 2025. I need to go back and find out when I created episode 1, what that actually was. Maybe we should do something to celebrate the birthday of the podcast. But in the beginning of Web 2.0, and I'm going back to the late 1990s, I guess, late 1990s, early 2000s, blogs and podcasts were really just getting started, in this idea of being able to have a global voice and put things into global distribution. You didn't have to go get a license from, in the United States, our Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, to have a radio station. We didn't have to buy a newspaper or a television station. Right? You're able to, publish content and syndicate content, meaning that people would get updates to your content using these wonderful tools like like blogs and podcasts, and technologies like RSS, which is coincidentally what Refugee Support Services uses as their acronym. But in the context of blogs and podcasts, RSS stands for Real Simple Syndication. And that allows for, new episodes to be delivered to people's devices, computers, screens, so they can, see the latest blog post or get the latest podcast. Podcasting has definitely continued to grow and expand, and I love the different tools that are available. One thing that, of course, I appreciate a lot is the relative ease of being able to publish and share content. This particular podcast that I'm making today is going to sort of be a bit of an old school podcast, because I'm recording it on my phone, but I'm going to audio enhance it, but then I will edit it together with, free and open source Audacity software, and I will insert little jingles and the outro and these different things. And then I'll export it out and, upload it. And that'll take some time in that post-production process. But, the Wednesday night podcast that I produce with Jason Neiffer, while we still have a traditional podcast, I've fallen behind in the post-production for that, but it's immediately archived. It's shared live over YouTube. On YouTube Live, we use a tool called StreamYard.com to do that. And it's immediately archived on YouTube for anybody to be able to watch. And anyway, I've been publishing content in a variety of places, and some of these, I would say, have less friction, and they just involve less steps, and it's an easier process to publish content. So I actually publish and share content on 4 different Substacks. And if you're not familiar with Substack, it is an outstanding newsletter platform, but it also has an app, and it is a platform that, shares. It does let creators monetize through subscriptions, but it doesn't, charge initially to set up a Substack. And so I am certainly not monetizing, any of my social media, to any great extent. I mean, YouTube, I tend to get maybe, you know, I don't know, somewhere between $50 and $100, every other month or something like that. It's just not very much. And I'm not really big on advertising. There's no advertising in this podcast. That's never really been my thing to really I want to, have a podcast that is commercialized. But anyway, Substack has been a good platform, that I have been publishing on. And so my main Substack is called Media Literacy with Wes, and you can find that at wfryer.substack.com. I have the aspiration of trying to do monthly updates, and I will really try to do that over the summer as well as in the school year. The other Substacks, I did set one up for the EdTech Situation Room that Jason Neiffer and I have, and that's a way of sharing out not only the links that we do talk about in the show, but the ones that we don't talk about. And that is a Substack that, I've updated, quite a bit. And I think I'm also just downloading the video version from YouTube and publishing that. I think I downloaded in a 720p quality, and then upload that directly to Substack, as a video podcast. The other 2 that I have are for some other projects that I'm involved in, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. But let me mention my lessons website. So a website that I've been maintaining for the last, I would say 6 years, is my lessons.wesfryer.com site. This was my, I guess, 30th year in education. It was my 10th. It was either my 30th or my 31st. It was my 10th year to be working in private independent schools. I was the director of technology for 4 years at our Oklahoma school. And then the last 3 years there, I pivoted to be a technology integration coach and then teach middle school media literacy. And, the last 3 years here in North Carolina, I have been working as a full-time middle school STEM teacher, primarily teaching, media literacy, web design, and coding, but I've also taught robotics. I've taught 6th grade engineering. And as I said, this semester I ended up teaching about a third of a semester of AP computer science principles. So anyway, that website, lessons.wesfryer.com, that is a Google site that I maintain, and it has pretty up-to-date, comprehensive links to the lessons that I teach. And so you can go up to the lessons menu item at the top and go to the child pages or the sub pages there, and you can see a whole variety of different lessons. My 2 big units that I do in my what's called computer applications or media literacy class are my family oral history unit, and then also a unit I call Fruit Loop Conspiracy Theories, which is about using the SIFT web literacy framework to vet and thoroughly check out an unfamiliar source online. Great media literacy skills. We do that through a study of a series of videos relating to the moon landing and the idea that the moon landing was faked. And then people who, address that and just have a whole lot of conversations around that. We also learn about lateral reading, which mainly means, using opening up new browser tabs to check out what other sources say about a source that you find online. So Mike Caulfield was the originator and creator of SIFT. And here a couple of weeks ago, I got to be on a webinar that he presented through TIP Teachers, which is Teachers for an Informed Public, that is out of the University of Washington. If you go to my main media literacy website, which is medialiteracy.wesfryer.com, I've got a link to TIP Teachers. Anybody can sign up. Here in Eastern Time, their meetings the first Monday of each month start at 9 p.m., so it's a little bit late Eastern Time, but they're all most all of them are on Pacific Time. They're on the West Coast. But anyway, Mike was talking about a new tool that he has created for AI. He uses it mainly with Claude, but you can use it with ChatGPT or other AI platforms. And it is basically a very long prompt. It's a culmination of 2 months of work, but it does what professional fact checkers might do to answer a question, to vet a photo, to to go through the SIFT process in stop, investigate the source, find trusted coverage, trace to the original. And then it also has these different, code words or trigger words that you can put in. They are code. And then you can have it do additional kinds of analysis live, on the web. So it's just really, really fantastic. And I would encourage you to check that out. I'll talk a little bit about some of these other lessons in my section about AI, but most of those are linked there and updated. The other two projects, and I'll just mention these briefly, that I've been working on now for over a year, relate to political polarization. Back in 2019, so about 6 years ago in the summer, I had the opportunity to attend and participate in the Summer Institute in Digital Literacy, which is still going on now, but it is shifted and is different. I participated in the Summer Institute in person in 2019, and then of course COVID happened and the Institute went online. And so for the next 3 years, I served as a faculty member in the Institute, helping facilitate some really wonderful studies and deep dives and investigations into a variety of different media literacy topics with educators all over the world, not just here in the United States. And the Institute itself was international as well. But that was a catalyst for several things. Number one, that was the launching catalyst for a project that I continue today called Conspiracies and Culture Wars. And that, I call it a media literacy inquiry project. Brian Turnbaugh is a friend up in Chicago who was at the Summer Institute with me and was really a huge, and continues to be a huge, I like the word catalyst, for my own learning when it comes to so many of these these ideas about how the information environment has been, changed, how it's been weaponized, how, trolls and folks who are in some cases bad actors, use social media and the connections that come through social media as a weapon to intimidate and even terrorize others. Sometimes those are elected officials. There's a whole nexus and how conspiracy theories and extremist views and things have been amplified and gained a lot of strength through the affordances of these platforms that we now use to connect each other with. So you can find out more about Conspiracies and Culture Wars also on my main media literacy website, but it's /CONCW, CONCW, which stands for Conspiracies and Culture Wars. That's the hashtag that I used on Twitter X when I was using Twitter a lot. I basically stopped mostly using Twitter a little over a year ago. So now on Blue Sky, on Threads, on Mastodon, on Spoutable, different social media microblogging platforms that I'm using, you can search for that hashtag. And the website where I have a lot of content, I presented, conference sessions and workshops, both in person and face to face about this topic. Those are all on medialiteracy.wesfryer.com/concw. And there is a link on the main media literacy homepage for that site. So out of all that has come a project called Resist and Heal and a project called Heal Our Culture. And I've actually registered those domains. So you can go to resistandheal.com, and you can also go to healourculture.org. I do have resistandheal.org registered. I just haven't connected that, and I registered the .com site first. But basically, before the election of the second election of President Trump in November of 2024, I really had a sense that, political polarization had reached a level in our country that was just so toxic, and that we needed to find ways to build consensus for shared values about things like civil discourse and even democracy and human rights. But there's a whole variety of different issues that are really polarizing issues today. Human rights encompasses, I think, the rights of all people, to include people who identify as LGBTQ plus. I also think that, the rights of people who identify as trans are extremely important, and they're human rights. But we're in such a polarized day where people, in some cases, don't recognize the rights of people to show up as they are, to tell us who they are, and to be themselves. And we also have, a number of other issues, from, healthcare and caring for each other to, gun control. We unfortunately have a lot of folks in the country today that really seem to worship tactical firearms. And I'm not going to go into this in depth here, but, as somebody who grew up, bird hunting in Kansas, and, as, shooting rifle and shotgun, in scouts, and then was in the Air Force, and, qualified expert with, 2 different firearms when I was, in the military. And I'm not somebody, who is anti-gun in any stretch of the imagination, but we've really had some negative cultural effects to the legalization of a class of weapons that are sometimes called assault rifles, the AR-15, the modern sporting rifle. There's this, and I'm not going to be able to say his name. There's an excellent TED Talk and book that an individual who is a former executive in the firearms industry has done, really talking about this toxic worship of tactical firearms, and it's really been this elevation of them, and to the point where now, we have a whole lot of issues. And as a classroom teacher and somebody who works in schools and is very aware of the threat that we have for school shootings, boy, there's a lot. There's a lot here, okay? There's a lot of different issues. I love the fact that we have advanced so far in science, and I love space exploration, and I'm a real space geek. But doggone it, we have got to figure out governance in our country and in our world. And worldwide, authoritarianism and fascism are on the rise. And so those are some of the ideas that underpin the Heal Our Culture project, and trying to amplify good examples of folks who are, doing good work in a variety of different arenas to build consensus and to heal, to be culture healers and not culture warriors. That's one of the ways that I've said that. And so I produced a few podcasts. I have a Substack for Heal Our Culture. And then the most recent website is this Resist and Heal website, which unfortunately I think is needed, because we are living today in mid 2025, in the midst of a dramatic political revolution in the United States. And this involves the most serious constitutional challenges that I have ever witnessed since I was born in 1970 and started witnessing things in terms of checks and balances with our government and the specter of not only authoritarianism, but fascism here in the United States. So again, I'm not going to go into depth with that, but I do want to point out that, part of the reason why I haven't had a lot of podcasts over here is I have been putting a lot of my energy and attention in some other places. And so some of these websites are those places. So there, I've done 2 segments, and now I'm going to get to what I said was the meat of the podcast, which is going to be talking a little bit about artificial intelligence in the past year, and specifically Flint AI. All right. Well, if you stuck around this long in the podcast, or maybe you've skipped to this section, welcome to the conversation about Flint AI and the ways that I have used activities in the Flint AI platform the past school year to help not only my middle schoolers, but also my high schoolers, I think, deepen their learning and, have potentially a better educational experience than we would have had otherwise. So as I had mentioned earlier in the podcast, ended up teaching 4 different courses in 5 different sections this year. And due to the resignation of a colleague halfway through the second semester, I ended up teaching the latter part of AP Computer Science Principles, which was actually my first time to teach high school class. I started off my educational career in 1996 teaching 4th grade and spent a lot of time teaching elementary. And then I ended up, after getting my master's, getting my doctorate and teaching, graduate as well as undergraduate courses at 4 different universities as an adjunct instructor, adjunct teacher. But then, after being the director of technology at our Oklahoma school for 4 years, I had this chance to go back in the classroom and go to middle school. So this was my 6th year as a middle school classroom teacher. I really, really do enjoy middle school. Of course, it is very challenging. I'm fortunate to work at a school that has excellent administration and supports us really well. And in some of the things that I know are very challenging for all teachers today regarding cell phones and social media, I really do appreciate the policies that we have as a school and also the consistent way that those are enforced, which I think makes a really positive impact on the classroom. But let me talk about these Flint AI activities. The first one I want to talk about is AP Computer Science Principles. If you're not familiar, and I wasn't familiar with this course, there are 2 sections of the exam which students take at the end of the course in order to get AP credit. The longest part, you have 2 hours to do this, is multiple choice. I think there may be like 75 questions, and it covers a variety of different units. I think there's like maybe 5 different units that students do over the course of the semester. But the last hour is what is called the Create PT project and writing prompts. And so the course is coding language agnostic. So students can learn how to code with Scratch. They can use JavaScript, which is what our kids used with Code.org's App Studio. They can use Java. It's the actual test itself uses what's called pseudocode, which is a generic language that is not specific to one particular coding language. So students had to create a program that had a parameter and a function and basically traverses a list. And so it's really cool. I want to learn more about how to use this myself. But the Code.org Code Studio allows students to access a variety of different data sources. For instance, the Netflix current videos, or IMDb, which is a database of like every movie, ever made, and TV movies and everything too. And so they can create something like they can, create a search tool that's going to let people, find G and PG rated, science fiction movies produced since 1990 or whatever. They can create these different queries, and it actually manipulates real data sets and returns values. And so every student's what's called Create PT project is different. And those were created before I started actually teaching the class this semester. And so students had already created those. Students, though, and I taught 2 different units in the course, and students needed to get ready for the written portion of their test. And so the written portion of their test was a series of questions, and what students had to submit into a digital portfolio before, several weeks before taking the test was basically screenshots of their code. They had to submit their actual I guess it was a video of their code in action, and then they submitted these screenshots that showed different parts of their code, and then they were asked about their code, and then they had to explain things like explain their function, explain their parameter, talk about how their program worked, and received input from a user and then gave output. So I created a activity with Flint AI that was a writing prompt. Well, it had 2 things. It was basically a an AP Computer Science Principles Create PT tutor. And so if you've ever created a custom GPT, it is basically, it's a prompt, but then it becomes like a canned prompt. And so you can just go to this link, and you can tell it to, start in whichever way you want. You can load documents, you give it information, and you set it up to basically interact with the user in a particular way. So I created this Flint AI activity so that it would ask my students, did they want feedback on their code for their project, or did they want to practice the Create PT writing activity for the test? And so initially, when my students were working on their code, we used this to get feedback. Now, I also, on my own, used just regular ChatGPT to be able to get feedback. And this was very challenging to jump in, 2/3 of the way through the semester and start teaching a class that I had never taught before. I think I've been a member of the Scratch community for like 17 years. So I've been teaching, coding in some form to students for almost 2 decades. But I hadn't taught this particular class, and I've never taught a class on JavaScript. So it was exceptionally helpful to be able to receive that kind of feedback. It didn't give us every, perfect feedback, but it was helpful. But then choice 2, was to practice some of the writing prompts. And so from my colleague, Mr. Reeder, who has taught AP Computer Science Principles, I think, for 10 years, we had a series of prior prompts that were in the writing tests. And the AP, the College Board changes, the AP Computer Science Principles exam every year. And, so it varies. They're not always the same, and it's always evolving. But basically, these were representative questions that students could respond to, and in practicing those, they would be preparing. And so what this reminded me of is back in the early 2000s, in like 2003, is that right? I think it is. Yeah. When I was working at Texas Tech University, I wrote a series of grants working with Apple Computer for a grant program in Texas called the Texas Immersion Pilot Project. And the result was I wrote those for 3 local schools around Lubbock, Floydada, Texas, Post, Texas, and let's see, it was Floydada, Post, and what was the other one? There was one that didn't get funded, I guess. But Floydada and Post were funded, and they got laptops for their students. And Apple had created a package of digital curriculum that went with these MacBook laptops that students received. And I vividly remember that one of those tools was called My Access Writing. And we didn't call it AI at the time, but it was a writing assistant that would provide feedback for student writing. And so students would write an essay, respond to a prompt, and then the computer would provide them with feedback. And so, that's what this AI tool reminded me of. And so my students were positive about it in terms of the feedback that they received. I had explained to them, I had 21 kids. I had basically about 42 students in two different sections of AP Computer Science Principles. And we were, doing this review at the end of the year. I mean, it just wasn't possible for me in a timely way to give, specific feedback to each student on their writing, but it was possible for the AI to do that. And so this was a really positive experience. I got positive feedback from my students. A number of them used this. I loved that I could see in the Flint AI interface exactly what students had done, because every interaction that they had with the chatbot was recorded, and I could go in and click on their name and see exactly what they had asked and what the chatbot had responded. And so this led to some good conversations, and I think my students were better prepared for the AP exam as a result of this use of AI. So that was course number one. Course number two, computer applications. I already mentioned earlier in the podcast that one of my favorite units to do with this middle school class, I call Fruit Loop conspiracy theories. I call it Fruit Loop because it's just like, these are like wild, crazy conspiracies, like, we never landed on the moon. Or the earth is flat. And actually the person whose video we watch, who argues about 13 reasons the moon landing was fake, he turns out to be a comedian, but he actually does have a video about the earth being flat. Anyway, in this class, students end up creating a culminating video project, and they write a script for it. And so this is the fifth or sixth year that I have done this project. I think it's the sixth year. It was in a very different form the first year, but here was my big takeaway. We used some AI tools last year in the 2023-2024 school year. But one of the things that frustrated me about using those tools is I felt that in a number of cases, students really didn't do the thinking in order to create their script. They basically just had the AI create their script and spit it out, and then they just used it. And while students had some high quality scripts, I really was unsure about what an effective assessment tool that was of their own understanding and knowledge about the concepts of the unit. And I just didn't feel like the AI tool was helping them exercise the muscle of their brain to really think about these things and be able to, explain them in their own words and be conversant and be very knowledgeable about, for instance, lateral reading and the different, steps involved in the SIFT web literacy framework and using it and applying it. So this year I created a different activity, and I was very, very specific with my students that I did not want them to ask the Flint AI activity to just write their script. I had given it examples of scripts. I had given it information about SIFT. I had explained the project. I like being able to create PDFs of my full lessons in Canvas, our learning management system, and then give that to the AI, and help provide background knowledge about the ask of what I want it to do. And so anyway, in some cases, I did have students who, because what I modeled for them and I asked them to do was go ahead and write, either bulleted points, or you can write a paragraph, write some ideas, but then ask the Flint AI assistant to then, make that better, or to improve that, or to give you ideas. We've used it to brainstorm some things in the past, and I'll talk about that here in a second, but this was really about writing and crafting writing. And so anyway, there were a couple students that I ended up talking with, and part of that was because of the visibility that I had into how they were interacting with it. And also some of it was I asked to review their scripts before they used them to record their video, which is basically a narrated slideshow that they did with still images. And, some of them sounded like they were written by college students. And I said, to several students, this doesn't sound like your voice. This doesn't sound like you write it. Did you just have Flint do this? And so this is not what I want. Let's go back to your planning document. So, I love writing. I started life in teaching as a fourth grade English language arts writing teacher. I love to write myself. And so, I've enjoyed to a degree having some, sort of writing across the curriculum in my class, in this computer applications media literacy class. I was super, super pleased this year with the way that my students used AI, and I think that had a lot to do with the guardrails and expectations that I put on them, and then the ones that I reinforced as I spot checked their work, because I asked them in their learning journal that they keep in a Google Doc to have their planning about what they wanted to have in their script, and then they had their script. And then, I have the AI, Flint AI activity to be able to take a look at what they had written and how they had interacted with Flint. And then we talked about this together on different days. And so anyway, I was very, very pleased with this. However, I will say this. AI gives us such power to create content. And now this is not just limited to written text, of course. This is images and video. And I need to do a separate podcast reflecting upon my first use of Google Vids, because within my personal consumer Google Apps account, I have access to this tool that lets me create videos with these video clips. And anyway, there's just a host of different media that we can create now, with our voice, with our words, with written text. This made me wonder the degree to which I should focus on the script writing in my class, because this definitely took a number of days, and it's hard work. I mean, anybody who's worked with 6th, 7th, or 8th graders to, put together an essay or put together, in this case, a script. It takes time. It takes work. It is not just something that comes easily to everybody. In fact, it doesn't come easy to just about anybody. It takes work. But we're in such a different day where students can, say, give a few sentences, give a few bullet points, and then have a very well-written paragraph. I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to be able to use AI tools with my students, because I know some institutions, the use of AI is completely banned and blocked, and that's true for some K-12 schools, as it's true for some community colleges, and in universities, I just know of a community college where that's true, and that may vary by department. But as a teacher, it really has me thinking about the ways in which, how are we dedicating our time? What am I focusing on? What are my goals and objectives? And one of my big goals and objectives are to communicate better, but it's not necessarily to teach writing. And so anyway, I hope I'll be able to engage in some more dialogue with colleagues about this, because this was a very positive experience, a much more positive experience than last year using Flint AI in this class, but it was still something that, I'm going to want to continue iterating on. Okay, 2 more classes to talk about, and then we're done. Let's talk about my coding class. Well, I'll do that one last. Let's do web design. One of my last lessons for my web design class was about vibe coding. And if you're not familiar with the term, you can go to the English Wikipedia article for vibe coding, V-I-B-E coding. And basically, this is where you don't use code yourself, and you don't have to have coding really even knowledge and skills. You can just ask the AI to create something for you with code. And that could be a web page, that can be a program, and it will code the script and then get that to you. And so I showed my students, there's a good article that Kevin Roos wrote for the New York Times. I think it was in February of 2025 about this, and he has a good example with some screen recordings and captures. It's basically an app that a parent created where they could take a picture of the food in the refrigerator, and then it would tell them different lunch options that they could create for their child who had a 4-compartment lunchbox and needed to make sure it was all nut and peanut allergy friendly. And so, it created this, what was it called? Lunchbox Buddy app or something like that. So I have created several different web page, or I should say JavaScript web-based applications, some of which I use every week. I put those on GitHub. I think I have details about those on ai.wesfryer.com, which is a Google site where I've kind of aggregated some of my different experiments with AI, as well as some of my presentations that I've given about AI. And anyway, this was successful. So I created a Flint AI activity and then invited my students to, see what they could create as a web page. One of my students created it was a random color generator, but basically we had learned about hexadecimal color codes this year. And so he, prompted Flint AI and it created this, HTML with some JavaScript, little single application file, and it chose a random color and it showed you the hexadecimal color. I mean, this was something just created for fun in a single lesson, but that was an actual functional file and project. And I think that vibe coding and coding with AI is mind-blowingly powerful and transformative. So I was glad to have an opportunity to be able to use Flint AI with my students, introduce them to the idea of vibe coding, and I hope in the months and years ahead, it'll be something I'll be able to integrate more into my classes. Lastly, let me talk about my computer science or my computer programming class. So I started the semester with two computer programming classes. I had one in the fall, I had two in the spring, and then when I ended up needing to take this AP computer science, both of these sections, I gave one of my sections was taken over by a colleague, because like for us 5 classes is an overload. So I didn't want to take 6. And so anyway, but I still had one of these classes throughout the whole semester. And my colleague, Todd, and I ended up brainstorming a unit that I absolutely loved. And the unit was about, basically pixel art, but 2D and 3D pixel art. And I think I'll include a link to this. I'm pretty sure I did share this on my lessons website. The idea was kids would spin 2 different spinners, and the first spinner would provide them with one of 20 terrestrial animals, real animals, name of an animal, and then the second spinner would provide them with either a mythological creature or a winged creature, and then their task was to hybridize these 2 creatures into a single new creature, and they were going to then first need to figure out its backstory and sketch what it was going to look like. And so we had all kinds of wonderful, wonderful creatures. And this is where the AI came in. So I made a Flint AI activity that would help students visualize the physical characteristics of their mythological creature, but then also imaginatively create a backstory for their creature. And, the kids got so creative. They brought their own ideas, but wow, did this ever really amplify and sort of energize the creativity. The visualizations that Flint AI was able to create were just astounding. When I had, I think 2 years ago, two school years ago was the first year that we used Flint AI. The image generation was really, really poor, and just to the point where I didn't even, use it myself at all. But it's become really good, and that's also a function of the underlying, AI platforms that they've continued to upgrade and use, continuing to improve. So students recorded in their learning journal this backstory. They included some, their sketch that they had drawn on their iPad of their creature. They included in some cases, visualizations that Flint AI had created. Then they went on to use a pixel art website to create a 32 by 32 pixel version, which is a very low res version of their mythological creature. And then they went into Scratch, which is a programming language from MIT that we extensively use in our coding class. And they created a 2-dimensional version of their creature as a sprite which is a character, and then they had to use some animation in order to tell the backstory and explain about their creature. Then we went into Minecraft, and students had done a whole unit, which I call Minecraft Mars or Coding Mars, where we use the agent or the robot in Minecraft to basically create a extraterrestrial or an off-planet, I guess I should say. Is that extraterrestrial? Whatever. It's not extra. Whatever. An off-planet, like habitat and base. I'm trying to not use the word colony and colonization. So this is like a Mars base. And so they use the robot to, farm and then create habitat domes and then, create, then to go mine and to bring resources back and drop off resources, and then to create different structures like landing pads and domed, structures with different sorts of habitats inside. So anyway, kids knew a lot about Scratch. They knew a lot about coding with Scratch and then coding in Minecraft education. And so then they had to use code. They hand built their mythological creature in 3 dimensions, and then they used what's called a structure block to duplicate it. And so the structure block basically takes a snapshot picture of a, defined by coordinates, 3-dimensional, rectangular prism, I guess would be the word, because it doesn't have to be a square. And then other people can download that structure block and then recreate the creature. I think it has a maximum block size of like 64 by 64 blocks. Anyway, some of the kids that were making sort of long-tailed dinosaurs had to like make their tails a little shorter because they had to fit within that 64 block length limit. But then the coding part was they had to then use code to have their agent build their creature. And so I do have this link. I'll share it, and it has links to the sprite and the Scratch backstory, and then the Minecraft structure block, and then the actual Minecraft make code that creates these creatures. Wow, this was such a fun project. My kids, many of them just talked about how much they enjoyed this and loved this. It really brought together a lot of skills. I think it gave them a chance to really showcase their coding abilities, but the creativity that they were able to have, I totally believe was amplified so much through the use of the Flint AI activity. And yes, we could have just on our own, come up with these backstories, but it was really fun, just like you would with a partner as you brainstorm to get other ideas and then to pick and choose. They didn't have to go with, exactly what it said. They could use any of those ideas, and man, they just came up with some fantastically creative creatures and the ways in which they brought them to life with 2-dimensional pixel art and then 3-dimensional, design within Minecraft using Minecraft code. It was just fantastic. So if you have stuck with me through this lengthy podcast, congratulations. I would love to hear that. Share feedback. You can go to my website, wesfryer.com/contact. There is a contact form there that you can click and let me know that you're listening. I think if you're listening to this, I think I'll probably put this on YouTube, but then you may, just be listening to it on my website. You can comment either place there and just let me know that you're listening. If there's anything in particular that you found compelling, if there's things that you have questions about, if there's a link to a resource or tool that I mentioned and I wasn't clear about what that is, or you'd like me to, provide that, I will try to do my best to provide a comprehensive list of links. And yes, I will probably use AI tools to help with that because I can, now grab the transcript of my own, video on YouTube or just audio. That's one of the things that Descript does. And then I can use an AI tool to help extract those links as well, so that hopefully I'm very thorough. But you have been listening to Moving at the Speed of Creativity with Wes Fryer. I hope that you're having a great educational experience, whether you are a teacher, a pre-service teacher, somebody who's just an advocate for AI tools, somebody who's interested in these tools. It really is an exciting time to be alive. It is important for us to use these tools, play with these tools, and reflect on their use. And that's part of what this podcast has been doing, or, a role that it's been playing in my life for now about 20 years. And I hope that you will find ways to use social media tools and social platforms as well to be reflective in the same way, but also connect with others with shared interests and passions, and deepen your own learning and your own journey as we seek to do good things, to continue learning, continue teaching, but hopefully continue, working to make the world a better place, which is the opportunity that we each have. So until next time, stay savvy, stay safe, and we'll see you next time on Moving at the Speed of Creativity podcasts.
Moving at the Speed of Creativity podcasts are independently produced by Wes Fryer and are licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Only license. Learn more at www.speedofcreativity.org.